Hey everybody, it's Mr. LeBlanc with answers for students' questions about Catholicism. This set of questions is all about prayer, and it's a bunch of questions. Let me read them out here. For your personal prayers, how do you do them? Okay, that's the core of this question, is how does LeBlanc actually pray in his personal prayers? So I'm willing to share some of my prayer experience with you, and it is not the way every single Catholic prays, it's not the way every single human prays, but it's me. I'll share them with you this time in this video. Are there specific positions, intro, outro, or things you have to do before and after? Is it really as easy as starting and finishing no matter what your state is? And what I think this student is getting at is when we experience prayer or a prayer tradition, very often it comes to us from a religious context in kind of like a formal way. And sometimes the idea that we see prayer happen in church, and very often it's formal, very often it's out of a book, very often it's led by usually a priest or somebody else who's in authority. And then we have like personal prayer, so my heart, and how do I go about doing that on the other 166 hours of the week when I'm not at church? Great question. Is it really that easy? Yes. So the big thing about prayer is that while there are formal prayers that we have in our tradition, all prayer needs to come from the heart. So it is possible to speak or be present for formal prayers and not put your heart into it. If you don't put your heart into prayer, you get less out of prayer. So it is possible to go to church and to be disengaged from the prayers that are happening and not bring our own hearts to it. So that's something that we kind of need to watch out for, because there is a tendency, if we're in a culture that it has a lot of Christianity or a lot of Catholicism, if our family has been attending Catholic Church, it is possible for us to just go along with everybody and just be there physically present, but to forget to bring our spiritual presence to religious prayers, to common public prayers that we do together. So it's always a good practice to go back to our hearts. I think actually today, when I'm speaking with my students right now, I think most students are not going to church every week with their families. Most of my students in my school, in my situation, right? So I think for most of the students that I'm working with, the question is really on the flip side. It's like, well, if I'm not going there, or maybe I want to, but I'm not sure how to begin that process, but where do I start if I'm not going to church, right? Or where do I start if I'm not yet comfortable going to church on a regular basis? And it really is, and this is where I need to reassure students, is prayer can look like really anything that you talk with God, anything that you connect with God, anything that you bring your heart to God. There's no wrong way to pray. There are ways, there's always a way that we can grow in prayer, and that's kind of one of the reasons why the formal prayers exist, is to invite us to kind of deepen our prayer. But starting off, we can't really go wrong if we're honestly in our hearts just turning to God. And so actually the other tradition is really just being informal and being real and authentic with God, and just turning to God in our hearts and telling him what we really, really think or what we really, really feel, and not trying to varnish it or trying to fit it into a format or trying to put the right, thou and these of the Bible verses in there. That authenticity of heart is actually where every prayer needs to start. And so, in my personal prayer, very often, the first thing I think of when I wake up and the last thing I think of when I go to sleep is I'm trying to turn to God in bringing him my day, either the day that I'm about to have or the day that I just had. So first waking and falling asleep, those have always been moments in the day that have the Jews, and I probably would say the Muslims and Christians all have turned to God, and some of them have set formal prayers for that, but they don't have to be formal. So very often I wake up and I just ask God, I give you this day. God, please help me to follow you. God, I'm worried about what this is going to happen. Please bless this situation or bless this person. Or I might, if I'm looking back on the day, last thing at night, I might say, I tried my best today. I'm sorry for when I didn't actually measure up, or things that I couldn't do because of my weakness or because of my sinfulness. And so I entrust the day to you. Okay? So beginning and end is a good time. The other thing to remember about prayers is that they can be brief. So you don't need an introduction. You don't need an outroduction. And it would be way better to turn to God quickly and say, God, please help me, or Jesus, I trust in you, or Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. It would be way better to turn to our hearts really briefly and be authentic in that moment than to say, oh, well, I don't have time to open my Bible. I don't have time to start in the name of the Father and the Son, and I'm on the bus. People will look at me, so I'm not going to pray. It would be way better to pray informally in our hearts to God. Okay? So don't hesitate to do that. It actually really does help, and it grows your prayer life. There are other strategies. Some people really like to journal, and they write a letter to God in their journal. Some people have found that really powerful. At times in my life, that's been a big part of my tradition. But I think I would say, so anytime during the day, especially if you're feeling a strong emotion like joy or sorrow or fear, just to turn to God in that and give him that, and just say what's ever in your heart to God. It's okay to say things that other people might think is offensive. God can take it, right? If you're angry at God or you're really mad that something's happening in your life, you can tell God that. He can take it. And the last thing would be just, back to the formal prayer. Anytime we have like that authentic surge from our heart, like what I've found is eventually just being spontaneous and just turning him into my heart, eventually I find that I want more. Right? The more I turn to God with what's really in my heart, the more I'm like, I need to spend more time with you because I need to hear what you have to say to me, God. And that's when we start to introduce other things like praying the rosary, things like reading the Bible. I have a set form of prayers that I pray in morning and evening. It's called the Liturgy of the Hours. And those can be like really, really long, like they could be really involved formal prayers, or they could be shorter ones. So just saying a Hail Mary or a Our Father. Sometimes when I want to turn to God in my heart, but I don't really have anything in particular to say to him. Those formal prayers give me the words to enter into prayer so that my heart and its longing to be with God has some words to go along with it. Okay? So those are, we could go on and on and on about this. This is part one then, that when I am praying, certain moments in my day, I turn to God spontaneously. And then at other times, I find that I need something more than just what's in my heart because I get distracted, I run out of words, but I need to stay in that longing and that moving towards God. And that's when I reach out to the prayers of my tradition. So maybe that's a pattern that you can follow, or maybe you're going to have to find your own way through, but your prayer life is really up to you, right? It's your responsibility. You're also the authority. You are the pro at how you need to pray and what you need next for your prayer to grow deeper. And the tradition, my sharing, 2,000 years of Christian history sharing, that's to help you fulfill your responsibility and to equip you and encourage you to reach out for what you need to pray in the best way that you know how. Thanks so much for listening to this answer about my prayer life. I really actually appreciate that you're listening to how I pray, and I pray that you will be able to move forward in your prayer life by growing closer to God, by never hesitating to reach out to him with whatever words and whatever traditions that you've been given in the moment. Thanks, God bless, and we'll see you in the next video.